With our latest Pokemon TCG set Temporal Forces, we received the first wave of brand new and returning A-Spec cards. Cards that haven't been in the game since the black and white era almost 12 years ago. We received some incredibly powerful cards that have become staples in pretty much every deck. We even received some A-Specs that are specific to certain decks and types of cards. We even received an A-Spec energy card. Twilight Masquerade is just around the corner, and with it we will be receiving 6 more A-Spec cards, and in this video we'll be taking a look at those cards. Considering how strong the ones we received in Temporal Forces were, I imagine these new ones will be just as powerful, if not more powerful. Without further ado, and in no particular order, let's take a look at all of the A-Spec cards we can expect to see in Twilight Masquerade. Starting us off, we have Legacy Energy, which reads, while it is attached to a Pokemon, it provides 1 energy of any type. When the Pokemon this card is attached to is KO'd by damage from your opponent's active Pokemon, they take 1 fewer prize card. Only apply this effect of Legacy Energy once per game. This card is much better than the other A-Spec energy card we received in the previous set, by simply being more generic. Not only does it count as any one energy type, meaning it can fulfill any energy type cost, but it also has the added benefit of making a 2 prize Pokemon give 1 prize card, and a 1 prize Pokemon give 0 prize cards. This card has potential to see some use in a couple of decks. In stall decks, it can make your stun Pokemon give no prizes, or if it's attached to something like Banette EX or Chi-Yu EX, it turns them into single prize Pokemon. Plus, it could even see play in Lugia, making your Cinccino a super strong 0 prize attacker, and it's a special energy, so Primal Turbo can search it out of the deck. The effect to reduce prizes is only once per game, however, so if you play a certain card that can recover special energies from the discard, the effect won't apply for the rest of the game if you attach it again. Also, it only applies when the Pokemon is KO'd by damage, so Roaring Moon EX and Giratina V-Star can bypass that effect because the insta-KO attacks don't count as damage. Even with that one downside, this card is still really good. Next up is Unfair Stamp, which reads, you can play this card only if one of your Pokemon was knocked out during your opponent's last turn. Each player shuffles their hand into their deck, then you draw 5 cards and your opponent draws 2 cards. This card is literally a copy-paste of the support card Roxanne, however it has a different and much easier activation requirement. Roxanne could only be played if your opponent had 3 prize cards or less remaining, while Unfair Stamp can be played after any of your Pokemon were knocked out last turn. This card is pretty much just a better Roxanne. Not only is it an item card, so you don't waste your support for the turn, but its activation requirement is much easier to achieve, and because of that, it can be used very early into the game instead of having to wait until the late game. A perfect punishment for your opponent if they decide to take an early knockout. Another incredibly good and generic A-Spec that will definitely see its fair share of play, depending on what decks and which players decide to play it. Next up is Hyper Aroma, which reads, search your deck for up to 3 Stage 1 evolution Pokemon, reveal them and put them into your hand. This card is our first bad one of the batch. Well, it's not bad, just very deck specific. The only deck that instantly comes to my mind that could potentially play this is Lugia again. Being able to search your Archeops to discard them, as well as your Lugia V-Stars and Cincinos to start evolving. However, there are already a bunch of item cards and supporter cards that can fulfill those needs. Ultra Ball and Capturing Aroma, some lists have even been playing Great Ball, Master Ball has been the main deck's A-Spec of choice, so there is a possibility that this card could replace it. But now you're left with a tough choice. Hyper Aroma or Legacy Energy, a strong multi-search card or a special energy that makes your 1 prize attacker a 0 prize attacker. Overall it's not bad, it just has the downside of being deck specific. Next is Survival Cast, which reads, if the Pokemon this card is attached to has full HP and would be KO'd by damage from an attack, it is not KO'd and its remaining HP becomes 10 instead. Then discard this card. Another card that is very niche Its effect is good, stopping your Pokemon from being KO'd and thus denying your opponent from taking prize cards. However, the card also has the same problem as Legacy Energy, being that if your opponent uses an insta-KO attack, the Pokemon won't survive on 10 HP since it doesn't count as damage. Also, the effect only works when the Pokemon is at full HP, so if your opponent does a bit of chip damage first and then KOs the Pokemon next turn, the effect won't activate. But then again, that is also a benefit to playing it, as it could deter your opponent from attacking that Pokemon, attaching it to one of your attackers or a support Pokemon that your opponent might be looking to knock out, especially if it's an EX or V Pokemon. The card does have its uses in the right deck. What deck or decks those are, we will have to wait and see. Our second to last A-Spec of this video is Scoop Up Cyclone, which reads, put one of your Pokemon and all cards attached to it back into your hand. An incredibly simple effect, but an amazing one. Cards with this type of effect may seem useless at first, but are incredibly strong. Anyone who played during the first year of Sword and Shield will be familiar with a certain card called Scoop Up Net, which did the exact same thing and was one of the best cards at the time, because you could use it in multiple different ways. You could use it on your active, given it wasn't a GX or V Pokemon, meaning you didn't need to waste a switch or retreat. You could scoop up a stage 1 Pokemon with a powerful effect such as Drizzile to then evolve into it again on a different Pokemon, and if you had multiple scoop up nets, you could do it over and over. You could also scoop up a Pokemon that has taken damage, denying your opponent a knockout, and then just put it back down and power it back up. There's a reason why Penny and Professor Turo's scenario are seeing play in certain decks, because they have so many uses depending on the game state. Plus, with this being an item, you don't have to use a supporter and can instead use something else. Another incredibly powerful A-Spec cards for players to consider when it comes to building their deck of choice. And last but not least is the A-Spec card Secret Box, which reads, discard 3 cards from your hand in order to use this card. Search your deck for 1 item, 1 Pokemon tool, 1 supporter and 1 stadium. Reveal them and put them into your hand. This card to me seems both good and bad. Good in the sense that you get to trade 4 cards in your hand, including the A-Spec, for 4 specific cards that you may need for the turn or for your follow-up. You can grab a powerful item card to nab you other key pieces, a tool card to buff your Pokemon or something like Forest Sealstone to get any card you want, a powerful supporter that could help build up your board or draw you more cards, and a stadium that could slow down your opponent or net you even more card advantage. However, what if you don't play tool cards or stadium cards? Then you are basically trading 4 cards for only 2 cards. For some decks that may seem okay since you might want cards in your discard depending on the deck. But for most decks, the trade-off is not worth the payoff. The card could see play, but only in decks that can make full use out of all the searches that you get. Even then, there are better A-Specs that do more and are generally more powerful. Plus, there are plenty of other cards in the game that can search for whatever you need for the turn. We have cards such as Arven, which can search an item and a tool card, already fulfilling half of what you do with this card and without needing to discard cards. It's not bad, but it's another card that I think will only have its uses in specific decks. Overall, for the second wave of A-Specs, this is along the lines of what I expected. A mixed bag of powerful generic cards and some cards that are more specific to certain decks and strategies. I personally expected this wave to be more powerful than the A-Specs we received in Temporal Forces, but needless to say I am pretty surprised and excited to see how these cards will influence deck building choices once they are released, along with what the next wave of A-Specs could hold in our next mainline set, whenever that will be releasing. Let's hope that the Pokemon Company continues along this formula of releasing strong, generic A-Spec cards. Giving players multiple choices of what to play in their deck is a great way to promote diversity and uniqueness in an already diverse format, even if most of the decks are all playing Prime Capture.